So welcome all, welcome to this episode of the Data Transformation Series with the Digital Transformation Lab in UCC. And today we've an old friend back, Dr. Tomas C. Redman, as we'd say in Ireland. Tom is what I normally refer to, and I hope that's okay, Tom, for this episode.
Of course, yes.
Excellent. Tom, look, in a way, you are a giant of the especially the data quality field. For anyone that may not know or knows less about you, can you give us a quick intro?
Yes, of course. Well, thank you for that, Paidi. Look, I do two kinds of things in the world. The first thing I do is I work with companies on their data and data quality programs. They may have a specific problem, like, we can't find the oil well, or they want to improve their know your customer kinds of functions. The problem may be that they need to set up a data strategy, or they recognize some weaknesses in their organization. There's a really important point here. A lot of the standard approaches in data and data management simply do not work well. And a lot of times I get called when people are sort of frustrated with that. We need to think differently about this problem or our organization, or where we're going to put the data scientist and so forth. And so maybe I spend 2/3 of my time doing those sorts of things. And then the other third of my time I've spent like trying to understand why we're moving so slow in the data space. And if you think about it, the basic results of data quality, the basic methods and approaches of data quality, they're a full generation old. The basic approaches in analytics, data science, whatever you want to, they're even older than that. And these methods and approaches have proven themselves in time and time again. And so a fundamental question is why are they not standard by now? And maybe I spend 1/3 of my time trying to think this through, trying to work with others, trying to express best practice in ways that make it easier for those who aren't so far along to join the fun and join the benefits at all levels.
And Tom, like I've read many of your books at this stage, and I think they go probably back nearly 3 decades at this stage. Tom, why is bad data still the norm?
So look, the answer, first of all, let's understand what the bad data problem is. So a lot of people sort of think we got bad data in systems don't talk to each other and so forth. And those things are true, but the fundamental problem is, let's just suppose you work in sales and you come to work in the morning and your job is to follow up on leads generated from marketing. And the problem you have is that you spend an enormous amount of time cleaning up the data, that leads data. It is just not fit for you to do your job. Okay, well, now take the next group in line. Maybe that's operations, and they are taking the data from sales and trying to send people the stuff they need and get it to the right place and so forth. And people in operations spend an enormous amount of their time cleaning up data too. So, man, this just goes on and on. So finance managers tell me that their staff spends 3/4 of their time dealing with mundane data issues. So go to decision support. Managers question the data. Can I trust this? Can I use this to make a decision? Where a lot of people now are really into AI, and so 80% of the effort in AI is dealing with data issues. And so by and large, I use the term hidden data factory, right, to refer to the work that each department is doing to make the data it gets from others fit for it to do its job. And if you look at companies, so basically what they become is these daisy chains of hidden data factories. So, everybody, so throughout everybody is dealing with the same fundamental issue. and passing it on to the next guy. So, some spend a third of their time dealing with bad data, and others a half, and maybe up to 80% in data science. And it breeds enormous mistrust in data and decision making and anything that we want to do technologically, right? Now you ask the question, why is this? I mean, and let's go back to that salesperson who comes in and they're on a quota. They have to make 23 legitimate calls this week, and they've got this bad data from marketing. Well, what are they going to do? Well, they got to get their quota. They got to make their quota. So they're going to work to correct that data. And of course, the proper thing to do is realize that we've got to get out of this. We've got to quit dealing with bad data all the time. We've got to figure out how to reach upstream to the points of data creation and make the root causes of those errors go away. Right? And there's this sort of, fundamental problem. On any given day, it is easier to correct the bad data, even though long term, like next week, it perpetuates a system where there is more and more of this error correction going on. And I want to add, that work is not fun, and it is not easy, right? But this misconception that the way you attack data quality is by finding and fixing errors, right? That is at the root of why these problems are everywhere. And I really want to emphasize that these problems are everywhere. Nobody is not affected by bad data. Nobody's job is not impacted. And we in our personal lives, so once you see this right, just look at the number of times that, you have to correct something from a store, or, it's your cell phone provider, or whatever. So spend an enormous amount of time. Again, right, the root of this is that we have gotten in the habit of thinking the right way to attack the issue is to deal with the individual problems, as opposed to deal with the root causes and make thousands of future errors go away.
Yeah. And just to maybe frighten our audience a little bit, Tom, you yourself, and I think it could have been with two of my colleagues here, Dave Salmon and Tig Nagel, identified only 3% of companies meet their own basic data standards, which is quite frightening in lots of ways. So that just shows the scale. I also know, and I've heard people reference you, Tom, talking about what is the impact of that. It could be as much as 20% of profit. It could contribute to 50% of day-to-day costs. So that's massive. Tom, I remember, I can't remember.
By the way, let me just interject, right? Because we did really some fundamental work, me and a couple of your colleagues, when I was teaching at the IMI, to make lots and lots of these data quality measurements, these first data quality measurements. And if you ask people how good their data needs to be, most people say, well, it's 100%, right? These are about healthcare. If these data are bad, people die, or these data are about money. And if something happens, then people complain they've lost their money. And then the only response we showed to that is the only response is, well, then you're killing people and you're stealing their money, or whatever it is, because the statistics that we took up, people making their own measurements in their own function, right, were stunningly bad. And then as I just make one correction, sort of like, the best estimate of the total cost of this is not 20% of profit, but 20% of revenue across an organization. So the numbers, and again, it's the 30% of people's time in marketing, and 75% in finance, and 80% in data science, and decision makers sort of go back and redo this kind of thing, and man, those things add up enormously.
And I remember, Tom, I was trying to remember, was it one of the books or was it listening to you? But I remember you talking and using a lovely metaphor, which was that, you know, the databases are maybe like a lake. What feeds them then is like streams, and that most organizations, when there's data issues, are trying to fix it in the lake as opposed to the streams, i.e. these hidden data factories. So I think that's a really nice metaphor. You also talk about I suppose the data creators and the data consumers are very often not in communication. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, let's pick up on that creator and customer role, and because I think this gets at the heart of it. Most people don't ever think about it, but every day and many times a day, they are in two roles. First of all, they're a data customer. They are using data created by someone somewhere else in the organization. And when I say someone, by the way, I mean, it could be an automatic device that's creating this, but the data they didn't create the data. They are a customer in the sense that they are using data created by other people. And they're also a creator. And that means that they are creating data that the next person or application or process in line is going to use. And people don't think about themselves being in these roles very often, but like when you point it out to them, everybody goes, "Oh yeah, of course I'm in those roles." And like if you're a customer in practically every other area of your life, if you buy a car and the car, you take the car home and you find out that there's a tear in the carpet and in the floor, right? Then you don't fix that carpet yourself. You take it back to the dealer, right? I mean, and yet people in the data space assume it's their responsibility to fix the creator's error. They would never do that in almost every other aspect of life. And similarly, as they're a creator. And so most people, when they find out they've been sending faulty data onto the next process or person, well, wears the same badge they do, by the way. I mean, they're embarrassed by that. They don't want to be doing that. But people are in silos. And they're looking at their job very narrowly as to, get these 23, make these 23 contacts this week, or ship this material, or create this model, and not thinking about the long term. I mean, again, next week, right, about these roles and how they could become a better customer and a better creator. And it's really not that hard, but then it makes life so much easier for everyone across the entire company.
Yeah. And I recall you telling a story of, I think it was Samantha giving a really important presentation to a board, I think, Tom, having Stephen then look back because she was questioning, I think, was it the widget department data, finding out that there was an issue with it. And instead of going sorting the issue with the widget department, each month from there on, they kept on adjusting the PowerPoint slides in order to correct the incorrect data coming from the widget department. And it's nearly endemic, Tom, isn't it? That hidden data factoring, the cost of that each month.
Right. So we developed this story and to really illustrate how easy it is to fall into the trap. But the action unfolds the day a woman. I usually call her Stephanie, but we'll call her Samantha today. But and Samantha is going to make her first presentation, to the board. And the day before, she's reading through her slides, making sure she's way over prepared, right? Kind of thing. And then her assistant calls and says, "Boss, there's a problem in these numbers from the widget department." And so naturally, I mean, she goes into a frenzy. So what are we going to do about it? You gotta fix it and stuff like that. Anyway, an hour later, he calls and says, I found a contact over there. I changed the numbers, right? I fixed your presentation, emailed it to you. You're good to go, right? And next, the next day, she goes off, and her presentation with the board could not have gone better, right? And you know, she comes back to her office. She gives her assistant the rest of the day off. You know, here 150 bones. Go, you know, go have dinner with your special someone on the company tonight. And just as he's leaving, she says, you know, we ought to check the widget department numbers every month. Okay. And the thing about that story is, obviously, you don't want her taking bad numbers to the board, right? Obviously, you don't want her doing that. But then after that, I mean, look at what she didn't do. She didn't call her friends over in the widget department and say, you know, hey, we got some bad numbers, right? She left others in her company to be victimized. And of course, what she should have done is you know, how are we going to get in front of this problem? Okay, but instead, she took responsibility in that customer mode for the quality of data she knows absolutely nothing about, right? And completely blocked the creator out. Yet we can all see ourselves falling into that trap. I mean, that story is just vile in every, you know, in every dimension. Some companies have a strong safety culture, and if you walk down the, you know, an aisle and there's a banana on the floor, so, well, what do? You know, you pick it up, right? You throw it away, right? You know, and if you don't, in some companies, it's a firing offense because you left. But she left others in her company to be victimized by bad data. And again, I mean, you can see the trap that, you know, she's excited, and anyway. So yeah, that's that story, and it illustrates sort of like the cultural dimensions of this, right? Because it wouldn't have been very hard for her after her presentation to find out who to call in the widgets department. It wouldn't have been difficult to say, let's do an improvement project together. Anyway, yeah.
And I think you're right, that cultural thing is really interesting, that behavioral thing, Tom, because you also call out that one of the most dominant reasons for bad data is because we tolerate it. We assume it's there and it's part of organizational life. Can you talk a little bit about that, Tom?
I mean, when you think about it, you know, if you're in let's, you know, focus on that salesperson again, and you know, that data comes in from marketing, and you know, you spend 3 hours every day correcting it. I'm like, you know, you didn't come into this organization to do data management, right? Yet you tolerate it, right? And I think that really, you know, it's a lot of times what has motivated people to change their approach is just, why am I doing this, right? And sort of anger. It's sort of like, you know, first of all, it's kind of like annoyance, and then anger, and eventually part of it is getting angry at themselves for, you know, allowing to, you know, it's really kind of dumb to do that. And so I recommend that, you know, people, so you get these errors, they're coming in from other places. Well, you know, you got to reach out and talk to them, and most are pretty responsive. But if they're not, it's time to get annoyed.
And like you've written a book about data-driven, Tom, and I think you also say that, can we really blame people and organizations for not being data-driven when they can't trust their own data? And I think that's a major issue. What percentage, and I've seen some maybe surveys of people really trust the data in their own organizations.
Yeah, Paidi, I'm really glad you brought that up, because the people don't trust the data, nor should they. Right, the data is not trustworthy, and I don't. You know, you can define data-driven in lots and lots of different ways, but I'm pretty certain that they all depend on trusting the data. And you know, so okay, well, use this data to make a decision, and it's well, why? I can't trust that data, right? I trust my intuition more than I trust the data, and so that is a really, really scary situation. We absolutely have to solve the data quality problem. If we want people to trust the data, we want them to use it to make decisions. We want them to do deeper analyses, right? We want to do AI. We want to do advanced analytics. Well, you just can't expect people to accept those things unless they accept the data.
Powerful. And Tom, in fairness, you outline some of the sort of the must-dos for particularly data creators that we start to rectify this issue. And I know one of them was that we need to start understanding our data customers. The second step is, or the second must-do, is that we can measure it. The third one is that we then put improvement plans in there. And the fourth is controls. Can you tell us about it? Because I think that's a powerful framework. Even those four elements are so powerful.
So right. So look, I mean, those four elements, those sort of basic tasks in quality management, I think they've been around since, there's nothing specific about data in them, right? So, but manufacturers, the manufacturing, revolution in all over the world, starting in Japan and then in other parts of the world, so, they may have expressed those concepts a little bit differently, but the basic idea, I mean, if you're creating something, a lot of things people create nobody uses, but the stuff they use, well, it's a good idea to know what they use it for and to try to design it to meet their needs, and then to find out, well, are we meeting their needs or not? I mean, you need some measurement in place, and then if there's gaps, then you need to close them, and that's what improvement's all about. And finally, once you get it working, man, you don't want it to start not working again, and that's what control is all about. And by the way, Paidi, I mean, for data, so most data problems, these steps are just not that difficult. Right? It is a matter of figuring out who your customers are and calling them up and say, hey, can we chat? Kind of thing. The measurement, we've used the Friday afternoon measurement, FAM, which we featured at UCC. So people can make that measurement in an hour and a half. Improvement is fun, and I really want to highlight this. So, doing data quality the right way is way, way more fun than putting up with all the errors and correcting them. Control's kind of technical, but again, it's just, okay, well, if things aren't working, how are we going to find out about it pretty darn quick and get it working again?
Yeah, and I still think it's quite radical, and maybe it says a lot about the maturity of the data quality space in general. When someone says it's radical, Tom, that you would suggest that we need the creators and the consumers sitting down together, and that the two most important moments in the life of any data is the moment of creation and the moment of use. I think that it has been sort of seen as quite radical, even though you might say, why we should have known this from sort of quality management, etc.
Okay, well, that's an interesting point, Paidi. I think people get into patterns of thinking, and a pattern of thinking in data quality is that we find and fix errors. And by the way, there's a cottage industry of tools providers that will help you find errors better, right? And so, maybe it is paradigm shifting that's not the way to approach data quality that, you want. But on the other hand, I mean, if you think about it, almost everybody, when they think about it for 10 minutes, recognizes that they've fallen into a vicious trap, and they need to get out of it. Right. This is not one of these things where you need an advanced degree and it's right. It was just look at my work. How am I going to make my work better? So, right. I mean, we need some, I feel I try to spend, I don't know, an enormous amount of my time sort of on a soapbox preaching this message. And in some respects, I've been remarkably ineffective. Because this message is pretty darn simple, and the work is far simpler than what companies are doing today. It also, by the way, it illustrates one other thing. I really want to emphasize the role of regular people, right? So there's two kinds of people in the world in this analogy. There's people with data in their title, and then there's regular people who don't have data in their titles. But Regular people have the most important roles. They're the creators and they're the customers, right? They're the people who have problems that data scientists are going to solve. They're the people that are going to put, new models to work and so forth. And it's like, in the whole data thing, we built these communities of professionals and completely ignored the 99% of the world who is dealing with the stuff every day. And you can, in some respects you can understand it, but in a larger context, this was a big mistake, right? Data quality programs have to start with how are we going to get everybody to understand their roles as data creators and data customers, right? All the data has to have to start with how are we going to get regular people involved. And I think, I observe that too many data programs start with, well, how am I going to get a tool in here, or how am I going to put in a center of excellence, instead of the organizational question of who needs to be involved, how are we going to get them involved.
Yeah. And I really like that, Tom, and that idea, and I know you've been writing a good bit about it recently, that the most important people when it comes to data quality are the people that don't have data in their title. And I think you also said, the smarter people don't have data in their title either, which is a bit provocative, but
Yeah, right. I mean, that's one of the things I learned in Ireland. Is put a little irony in it. It's a data. Regular people are those smart enough not to have data in their title, right?
Yeah. Very good. And Tom, it's still a really important point though, because I know looking back, through the years, the decades, maybe data quality was sort of seen as a technology or an IT problem, or maybe an engineering problem. And this is why I think what you've done is quite revolutionary. You're saying, well, actually, no, it's a people issue. We need to get people talking together. And I know I've shared the experience of being at one of your workshops, Tom, if not two, where you actually started by asking people, what are the important questions that we need to ask here for us to be able to do our business, and let's start from there.
Yeah, so I'm really glad you brought that up, Paidi, but I think that there is something really powerful and also hopeful in this message. I sometimes fear that people view me as a Luddite, right? When I say that the answer to data quality doesn't lie in the technology, it lies in the people. But look, and I have been doing this a long time. But if you look at the companies and the people who succeeded, and you look at why they succeeded, well, they did the things that we talked about, right? They recognized they had a problem. They recognized they had to attack it in a different way, right? They recognized that people in one way, shape, or form had these roles, right? They built a little bit of project management or program management to make it happen. And once they had, and they used simple things like the Friday afternoon measurement and the quality improvement cycle. Now once they got going, they may have built tools to automate things, so they didn't have to make a FAM every Friday afternoon kind of thing, but people and approach and the right organizational structure, those things came first. And it seems like it requires a little bit of investment, but it's not really true. You can get these programs up and going in months, and train up hundreds of people in the roles as data creators and data customers within months. These are simple things. So you're right. It's revolutionary. By the way, revolutionary. It's revolutionary in the sense that it's not the way most companies are going, and it's revolutionary in the sense that so people are pushing tech. So we're looking for tech, but I also think that it's when you look at what works. If you want to be data driven, look at what works, and the things that are working are these more human, right, organizational, approach driven ways to go about data quality than the tools.
Yeah, and Tom, and a few questions. And one, I really want to come back to this, is the Friday afternoon measurement. For me, it's a fantastic tool. I've seen it again in workshops. I've seen people use it in their own companies. Can you tell us a bit about it and where it came from?
So sure. So look, I mean, I actually developed this in response to a customer need. I was working at one of the big banks and on data quality, and sort of said, well, look, we ought to make a measurement. And so, well, how do you do that? We talked about that, and this guy kind of said, well, Tom, if we have to do that, we're going to have to research tools vendors, and we're going to have to issue an RFP, and then we're going to have to get it approved by tech, and then we're going to have to do this and that. So, by the time that'll, it'll take 6 months and $100,000, and we will have forgotten what we were worried about by then, right? Kind of thing, and so. So, literally, so how are we going to make this measurement kind of thing? And so the idea, well, let's just look at the data. So let's lay it out on a spreadsheet. And a lot of errors are obvious. Let's just sort of lay it out on a spreadsheet and get people who know the business process and know the data to look at it and just mark stuff that didn't look right, and later some things have evolved. It's like do the last 100 records and use a red pen and specific ways of counting errors. Those things developed later as we understood it more, but the technique itself was in response to and really directed at how are we going to avoid the 6 months and $100,000 to get started, and do something pretty darn fast. And the fact that they got the name the Friday afternoon measurement because the first people who did it on a Friday afternoon, and they told me they were doing it rather than going out early and having a drink, kind of thing, and it sort of got that name from that. No.
Yeah, and like my own experience is it's simple, but incredibly effective, and it is something you can do on a Friday afternoon before you go for it. And it doesn't take all Friday afternoon. It may take a few hours, but the insights are incredible. And that's where that 3% figure is coming from, Tom.
Yeah.
People sort of set up front what they would expect as a minimum acceptable standard. When they then measured against it using a sampling of maybe 100 of the last key pieces of data that they've or records that have used decision making, literally only 3% really meet their own standards. And I think it's a great tool, Tom.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Pod. We'll send you a link for the video on it, and if you can embed it in this thing. But by the way, I mean, I again want this is another way of thinking about the distinction between tech and just things that people can do, right? We read these stories about people who the sign in front of them said bridge out, but the GPS told them to keep going, right? And they believed the GPS rather than what was in front of them, right? And so the beauty of the Friday afternoon measurement, it is the simple, easy bridge out, and so look at it that way. See what is in front of you. Act on what is in front of you.
Yeah, and I know people that have done it on a Friday have been really amazed at the finding, and lots of cases it's really challenged their thinking about how good their quality is. The rule of 10, Tom, I'm fascinated, and I know in fairness in the book you say it's not maybe scientifically based, it's based more on experience. Can you tell us a bit about that rule of 10?
Sure, I can, and I call it a rule of thumb, which means it's not a rule, but it sort of gets you in the right ballpark. And the basic idea of this is if it cost you a bone, to me a bone is a generic unit of currency. It could be $1 or euro or shekel or whatever it is. But if it cost you a bone to complete a unit of work when the data is perfect, then it costs you 10 bones to complete the the unit of work when there's something wrong in the data. It could be anything in the data, and I mean, and when people dig into it, it may be, sometimes it costs them 3, and sometimes it costs them 8, and every now and then there's an error that just costs them thousands of dollars, but get you in the ballpark. And what you can see is, I mean, just little math in our head, but say you have a 10% error rate, okay, and the error rate is bigger than 10% most of the time, but now you have 100 of them. Well, you have 90 good at a bone each. Those are $90, right? And then you have 10 that cost 10 bones. That's $100. So that is 190 bones. Now, if all of them were perfect, it would have been 100 bones. All right, and you've nearly doubled your cost to do this work. Even with an error rate. So most people say, oh, 90%, we're pretty good. Okay, fine, but you doubled the cost of the operation. And that's what the rule of 10 gets at.
No, powerful to know. And I think it does bring a lot home as well, in terms of the cost of data. Tom, I also recall you talking a lot about data provocateurs and their role within organizations. What are they, and what is that role they should have?
Yeah, that's a really important question. So most organizations, people sort of fit in the standard mode, and they're attacking data quality in the ways we've described. And then every now and then somebody pops up and they go, you know what, this isn't working. We're going to have to go about this differently. And so, they work some cycle, they pick a problem, and they make a measurement, they make a bunch of improvements, and in effect, they also write a script in there. Or it's fine for us to talk about, customers, measurement, improvement, and control is a high level of abstraction. But when somebody's done it in this particular company, in this particular department, it's much harder to ignore. And so we've labeled these people provocateurs. And the idea is they have provoked they poked the bear. They've provoked the organization into thinking differently about managing data quality. And almost every organization that's done well with it, there has been some individual who, or a pair of individuals, a few individuals, who stuck their head up and decided that the current thing wasn't working. And organizations owe these people an enormous debt. Because otherwise they'll just, continue to do things the way they are forever.
And are we seeing enough of them though, Tom? Because we talk about now, we've introduced the role of the CIO, and we've all sorts of, even data quality roles now in organizations. But I think you yourself call out that boards still don't really understand the risks and opportunities when it comes to data. What's broken here? Why isn't that message getting right up to board level?
So look, I've been studying that question for a long time. The first thing you ask is, are there enough provocateurs? And the answer is no. We need way more provocateurs. Just organizations, they have to, people have to, feel they have the ability to step out. And in terms of why people don't get the message, I think we've talked about this. There is sort of the standard method. So you attack data quality by putting in place a data quality tool, a team, and you equip them with a tool. You attack data scientists by putting in a data science center of excellence, and equipping them with all the tools they want, and doing everything in the cloud, and so forth. And the reason we need provocateurs is those things we just described, they don't work. Or to be more precise, they don't work very often. Okay, almost all data quality teams set up that way. They take the fundamental responsibility the customers and creators should have, and they put it in the wrong spot. And And so, so like why boards haven't gotten this and so forth. And so, there's 1,000 answers for that, Paidi, but they all seem to, start with organizational momentum is in the wrong way. And then the fascination with technology exacerbates that. I think, I mean, when you get me on a really bad day, you can kind of get me to say something, like senior management has sat on the sidelines while the data revolution has happened, and they have not done their job in recognizing that if we're going to benefit from digital technologies and we're going to benefit, we're going to really make data our asset, we have to manage differently. And it gets down and it impacts every single person in the organization, right? So it's, on one hand, we don't have enough provocateurs. And it's easy to say, well, anybody can be a provocateur because it is true, right? Any manager, any individual contributor can address data quality properly within their context and so. But fundamentally now, I mean, this stuff is a full generation old. And it is past time for senior leaders, boards, and so forth to recognize that, okay, we want to take advantage of data. We have to manage differently. We're not simply going to be able to bolt on a data team, and we have to make this part of everyone's job.
Yeah.
So
and in a way, Tom, like, and I'm going to be maybe a bit provocative back here. Even when the data is there, I'm not sure a lot of our leaders are actually data driven themselves. I don't think they're particularly good role models for how data should be used. So again, is that not an issue,
So look, I mean, one thing I find is that almost all leaders are really, really smart. Okay, and they've come up through the ranks and they figured out ways to accommodate bad data, right? And part of their success is they may have said, well, yeah, look, I figured out how to do this better than my colleagues. And so, right, I mean, that it certainly that is a contributing factor. But again, I think that, I mean, again, every senior manager I've ever met, every board member I've met, these people are smart, right? And I put some of this on myself and something, the stories are not easy enough, right? Get the joke at some level that haven't made it clear how this actually works in their organization. And by the way, I mean, when I advise companies, this is what I dive in and do. So I have these conversations with senior executives. How are you going to make this work across your entire company? And like I say, I mean, you said it's revolutionary. So we're not going to make this sale in 10 minutes. So most of the momentum is flowing in the wrong direction. I don't blame senior leaders. At the same time, those who want to transform their companies, don't talk about digital transformation or AI or whatever it's going to be, it starts with the data.
Yeah, Tom, and we need to maybe start landing this plane now, in terms of time. Tom, have you a few final thoughts, or maybe a summary that you'd like to leave, and we'll come back to maybe you explain to people where they can find out more about you afterwards, Tom. But are there any points you'd like to make that we haven't maybe made, or you'd like to focus on just in the last minute or two?
So yes, I do. I mean, look, I am extremely optimistic. I'm extremely optimistic for people. There has never been a better time for anybody at every level of the organization to put your hand up, right? And you're dissatisfied, with your job. You don't think you know anything about data, right? You are in the perfect position to make a contribution. You are in a perfect position to figure out what it means to be a customer, to work with others, figure out what it means to be a creator, right? To figure out what it means to use a little data to improve stuff, be a small data scientist. There have never been more opportunities for regular people inside organization to do something that is going to change their company, but also change them, right? To make their lives better. Paidi, the thing I look back on my career and I wish I had done sooner was I did not see how transformational data was for individuals, right? When they attack data quality, just outright, empowering it was for them. And to me, this is the main message. Opportunities for regular people abound. And I hope a lot of regular people see this video and go, yeah, I can do that. I can make a family. I can do that, right? Whatever it is.
Yeah, look, and you've a lovely saying. In fact, I think it was the title of your books, getting in front of data, and that real call to action. And I think the tools, techniques, your advice is really stuff, like you said, that individuals can put into practice now. It doesn't require these heavy engineering investments, technology investments. They're stuff we can do now, and I really recommend, Tom, people follow up on and have a look at your books. Your workshops are incredible. As I say, I've shared the floor with you, and I definitely one or two of them, Tom. Tom, where can people find out more about you and what you do?
Well, so our website is www.dataqualitysolutions.com. You can go to Amazon and find my books. Over the years, I don't know, maybe I've done 50 or 60 sort of 1,000, 1,200 word blogs at HBR. So if you go to Harvard Business Review, if you go to www.hbr.org, you can, just put in Redman and a bunch of stuff will come up. I just thought of it. I mean, there's info@dataqualitysolutions.com. I respond to everybody. Right. We have an enormous opportunity in the next generation to fundamentally change companies and people. And I'm most excited about the people part of it, kind of thing. So, I take all calls and look forward to hearing from people.
Yeah, and LinkedIn is a great source as well, Tom. I know I see you sharing some really interesting material on LinkedIn as well, and I know a good percentage of our audience here would be active on LinkedIn as well. Tom, thank you so much. Absolutely fascinating, and in a way I've heard maybe some of this before, but I still find it fascinating. I still find it revolutionary, by the way, so please keep going, and looking forward to more material coming out, and hopefully the message is starting to get in now, Tom. Thank you, Tom.
Yep, thank you very much for thinking of me, Paidi, and good luck to you and all my friends in Ireland.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll see you back this side shortly again, Tom, as well. Thank you, Tom.